What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy. Welcome back to Savvy Writes Books, and welcome to our newest episode of Deep Daves. Deep Daves is the series where we dive deep into guys named Dave and sometimes dive deep into the buttholes of buttholes named Dave. If you guys remember, we recently wrapped up our series on the first Dave subject of the Deep Dave series, which was Dave Hollis. Now, let's go into someone that honestly I think might even be worse, and that is Dave Ramsey.
I'm getting angry enough, I'm getting ready to start a freaking crusade against these people.
When I first announced that I was doing a video about Dave Ramsey for the Deep Dave series and that it wasn't going to be a very positive video, a lot of people were really surprised. People were like, oh no, you're telling me that Dave Ramsey is not good, but I love Dave Ramsey, but he helped me get out of so much debt. I had so many people messaging me and commenting to me with stories about how Dave Ramsey gave them amazing financial advice and helped them overcome debt, helped them pay off their credit cards, and got them into such a better financial place in life. And honestly, that's perfectly valid. I have never taken Dave Ramsey's financial advice before, nor am I a finance expert. So this video actually isn't going to delve into Dave Ramsey's finance advice whatsoever. I know next to nothing about finance from a professional level, and I don't feel like I would be qualified or equipped in any way to accurately judge his financial advice and the effectiveness of it. So instead, I'm going to talk about some other things regarding Dave Ramsey, regarding how he is as a boss, and regarding the way that he is as a person. As of right now, my plans for the Dave Ramsey version of the Deep Dave series is going to be 3 parts. In this first part, I'm mostly going to be focusing on his workplace environment and my interview with one of his former employees. The second part is going to focus a little more on what he thinks of multi-level marketing companies and the mixed feelings that a lot of people have gotten from that. And then the third part is going to delve a little bit more deeply into the lawsuits, which we will be covering a little bit today, but I want to go really deep into those and actually talk with some real lawyers about that. As you guys know, Dave Ramsey is a guy who really loves money. And speaking of loving money, today I'm gonna make some money because guess what? This video has a sponsor, and that sponsor is Atlas VPN. This is a really great time for Atlas VPN specifically to be sponsoring this video because currently Atlas VPN is running a huge discount on their 3-year deal for just $1.39 per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. The deal won't last for long, so make sure to check it out by clicking on the link in my description below. But Savvy, what is Atlas VPN? So basically, a VPN is a way for you to protect yourself and your data online. And Atlas VPN is a tool that encrypts your data and hides your virtual location. By inserting your email address, the tool scans the internet to see if you ended up in any recorded data breaches or data dumps that include emails, names, passwords, and other sensitive information. Enabling notifications ensures that you're aware of such incidents and gives you a heads up to change your passwords before anyone has the chance to steal your accounts. At this point, you guys probably know that I've moved most of my life entirely online, and one thing that I think a lot of the rest of us worry about, or probably should be worried about, is safety and privacy online. Even a small mistake can lead to the wrong people gaining access to your IP address and figuring out really scary things like where you actually live. On this channel, we're always talking about exposing scammers and preventing people from getting scammed, and one thing that I always bring up when we talk about this is that getting scammed is something that can happen to pretty much anybody. Sometimes we might think like, oh, I could never get scammed. The only people that ever get scammed are like my 90-year-old grandparents that just got the internet yesterday. But as we've seen from a lot of interviews and a lot of deep dives that I've done on this channel, that's absolutely not true. Actually, a lot of scammers are really smart, and by messing with the URLs that you click on, they can easily fool a lot of us and gain access to our private data. For example, advanced doxers might use a URL shortener that replaces just one space in the URL but ends up sending you to an entirely different location than the one you were trying to get to online, which could lead you to an IP tracker or to a download for malicious software on your computer. But thankfully, VPNs can help protect against that. Atlas VPN will not only disguise your actual IP address, preventing your personal data from being exposed, but it also has a feature that blocks malicious links so you won't have to click on them in the first place. Atlas VPN is supported on any and all devices, and all subscription purchases provide a 30-day money-back guarantee. Again, as I said earlier, they are currently running a special on their 3-year deal where you can pay just $1.39 per month, so don't forget to check it out by clicking on the link in my description below, which is atlasv.pn/savvywritesbooks. That is linked both in my description below and in my pinned comment. Thank you so much again to Atlas VPN for sponsoring today's video. Look at me making money on sponsorships on YouTube without ever having to start a cult. Now that might just be more than we can say for Dave Ramsey, so let's find out. After learning some news about Dave Ramsey and interviewing one of his former employees, I learned that Dave Ramsey is misogynistic, to say the least, and I would go so far as to say potentially a cult leader. And as you guys know, on this channel we don't believe in ad hominem attacks, and so just because a certain piece of financial advice might have been given to you by Dave Ramsey, just to be clear, that does not discount whether that advice is good or not. I am never going to be a financial advisor. If Dave Ramsey gave you a piece of financial advice and it worked for you, feel free to keep following that advice, or feel free to even apply his advice to other things in life. Just because he's a bad person doesn't mean something he said might not still be true. But today we're going to delve into Dave Ramsey, the way that he runs his workplace, the way he's made a lot of particularly women feel alienated and stifled at work, and we're going to talk about why we don't stand Dave. Let's get into it.
Dave. From the standpoint of, ooh, you will not go unpunished.
You guys asked for it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new, welcome for the first time. I'm Savvy, and on this channel we talk about books and business every Friday morning at 11 a.m. Central when we have new video premieres. I delve into business people, delving into companies, and specifically looking at either companies that produce books or books about business, but sometimes we look at just books or just business, and that's okay too. Throughout this video, I will be intercutting an interview that I did with one of Dave Ramsey's former employees. First of all, thank you so much to this person for reaching out to me.
Just to give me an overview, what was the overall experience like working for Dave Ramsey?
At first, it was nice. I started working there, I was pretty young, and it was a smaller company, so it kind of felt like they were doing things differently than the corporate world, and you kind of get love bombed. It's like everybody's super nice. There's this no gossip policy, so you feel like you can trust people. You constantly hear about how there's no other place that's like this. You know, so many people leave the corporate world to come work for Dave Ramsey or come move from across the country to work for him. So it's like, okay, this is pretty cool. Like, this is a good job. And just as time went on, I felt that I was swimming upstream in a lot of ways, and I was seeing stuff that I didn't really like. And you know, you get accustomed to it, and but as time went on, I started to realize the things that the outside world was saying was fairly accurate about working there.
Now, the employee that I interviewed for this video is remaining anonymous. I want to let you guys know that I did verify that she did work for Dave Ramsey in the past. When I first learned of Dave Ramsey's problematic history, and when I first got suggested the topic of doing a video on Dave Ramsey, it all stemmed from this one particular article. On Religion News Service, this article from January of 2021 is called, "Is Dave Ramsey's Empire the Best Place to Work in America? Say no and you're out." This is from January 15th, 2021. Let's read. Dave Ramsey has spent the past 3 decades trying to build what he calls the best place to work in America. From his headquarters south of Nashville, the evangelical Christian personal finance guru runs a media and live events empire that includes popular national talk radio show. Tickets to workshops on topics such as intra-leadership run from $3,000 to $10,000. I want to draw attention really quick to this idea that Dave Ramsey is an evangelical Christian personal finance guru. Now, as you guys know, I don't have any particular religious affiliation myself, and I have complete respect for anyone's religious beliefs as long as, you know, they're not harming other people. So I don't have a problem with Dave Ramsey himself being Christian or even being an evangelical Christian. The problem comes in, which we're going to see, which is when he tries to force his religion on other people at work and often toes the line of religious discrimination against his own own employees. During the interview with one of his former employees, his former employee recounted experiences of anti-Semitism at work.
When did you start to notice some red flags at Dave Ramsey's company, and what were some of those instances that started making you feel that this company was not originally what you thought?
The very first one, which to stay, Dave will completely deny this.
Okay.
But when I first started working there, I heard time and time again that men and women are not allowed to be in a car alone together.
That's the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Literally. And I've talked to multiple people about this, and even had somebody bring that up this week about how, isn't it funny that Dave was asked this recently, like in the last year, and he said, "Oh, I've never said that." Like, it's pure gaslighting. He completely said it. He said it 10 years ago. And I remember thinking, that's weird. Like, this is supposed to be a Christian place where we're all, respectful of each other. And why does he not trust men and women to be together, to go have lunch together? And
so is that like a thing, like men and women, when you were leaving company grounds, like a man and woman could not get into a car together? Like he would monitor that?
And that's the thing, is I feel like a lot of it was not this downright policing.
Okay.
I see you driving off, but it was this atmosphere of, I'm not going to go grab lunch with Bob, and we're not going to go hop in the car together because that's frowned upon.
So weird.
The spirit of things you don't do, and with this righteous living policy, it's just, it was such a gray area. And it was so weird because I was back then, I was in a relationship, and I remember, once my boyfriend at the time couldn't take me to the airport, and I remember having to get permission. Now, mind you, I was young, but getting permission from my boss to have a man take me to the airport. It's just, you get indoctrinated in stuff that, looking back, or the outside world would be like, what? That makes no sense. But once you're in a place and they love bomb you, this is why people call it a cult. And it went from there. I mean, it's not this place where day in and day out you feel a certain way, but then you learn what the pillars are and what they stand for, and you have weekly devotionals where it's a pastor, and you start to see the same type of ultra conservative, misogynistic pastors speaking. And I'm like, if this anti-Semitic guy comes one more time, I'm walking out of the room. And so often I would blindly, it's not that I would support it, I would just be there and just kind of ignore it, of like, this is dumb, but this is my job and this is what I have to do. And I'll roll my eyes to a friend. Now I realize I should have left many years prior to when I did leave. But yeah, it just kind of was like brick by brick, more and more of that type of workplace started adding up. And Dave would get on stage and would do his rants. And when a former employee launched a private Twitter account blasting the company, it was weeks of staff meetings where Dave would just chew out the company and would say if anybody had intel and who it was, he would pay them $5,000. And it was just this us versus them culture to the max.
I think it's really interesting, some of the stuff you were saying about religion in this company, that Dave wanted to be running a Christian company and that he was inviting anti-Semitic speakers. I wanted to know a little more about that, because I think a lot of people, when I mentioned I was doing a video about Dave Ramsey, a lot of people were like, oh, is there something wrong with him? He gives such good financial advice. And I don't think a lot of people know the type of religious discrimination that was going on in his company. So I guess, can you speak a little bit to the religion aspect? Was there a pressure to conform to Christianity or to follow Dave's religious beliefs while you were working there?
Yes, and I worked there before Trump was elected in 2016. Mm-hmm. And so I think you have this religious aspect of a business before Trump, and then a lot of those businesses probably becoming a little bit more far right, a little bit more evangelical during Trump's presidency. Mm-hmm. So before his presidency, it's righteous living clause. I mean, you can't live with your non-married partner. You obviously cannot be getting pregnant before you're married. I was told after my interview and getting my job that they looked at my Twitter to see if I was living with my partner.
Oof.
Like they outright told me that because the quote unquote Judeo-Christian values that they uphold does not, like, living with your partner, your non-married partner, does not reflect that. So it's all of these, like, I'm fairly sure that they asked me what church I went to in the interviewing process, and if they didn't, I knew that the culture of the place was an outwardly evangelical church, evangelical business. So I more than likely talked about it in my interview because I knew that that would help me. And so every Wednesday it's devotions, which means you have a pastor, and they'll have, Christian music, and it's a weird blend of a place that is not a true Christian company, but is a Christian company, if that makes sense. So don't apply there if you're not a Christian.
So, oh man, there's a lot to unpack here. First, I was curious about the anti-Semitism that you noticed at the company, especially like with some of the presentations. I guess, can you speak a little to what some of the things were said there that felt like, I don't know, discrimination against the Jewish faith or anything like that?
I honestly don't remember a ton of what the pastor had said, but I do remember it being jokes in his sermon about Jews or jokes about women. It's the whole, like, women belong in the kitchen, a joke like that.
So that's just a little background on Dave Ramsey's history involving religion at work, but let's continue to learn a little more about this process. Thousands of churches around the country, meanwhile, host Ramsey's Financial Peace University, a 9-week program built around his principles for handling money God's way. Ramsey's primary product, he says, is hope, often in short supply when debt mounts up. That's something Ramsey knows firsthand. When he was in his mid-20s, Ramsey and his wife owed him millions after his real estate business failed. Following advice from a church friend, they rebuilt their lives. So again, this is something where I'm saying that Dave Ramsey's financial advice is probably good. He probably, to an extent, knows what he's talking about, especially if he's pulled himself up out of financial ruin and out of debt. I respect him for that, and I respect the fact that a lot of people have gotten value out of his work. I do see a little bit of a red flag where he talks about how his primary product is hope. I don't have a problem with a mission statement for a business that can be a little bit broader, and a mission statement that connects to a person's emotions and desires, because I do think that's important for connecting with your customer as a business owner. However, when you talk about how primarily your product is hope above all else, that does start to set off a few red flags for me for what we see with MLMs, multi-level marketing companies, or what we see with cult type companies, or companies that really try to prey on people's insecurities. I think it would make a lot more sense if he said his primary product was financial advice or something like that, but when your primary product is hope, that does set off a few alarm bells for me, although that alone I don't think is enough to say this is wrong. I think your primary product could be hope, and you could do that in an ethical way, but let's keep going. The people who have followed his path now make pilgrimages to perform their debt-free scream on his radio show, celebrating that Ramsey's methods gave them control of their lives. But inside the company's $42 million headquarters, which opened in 2019 in Franklin, Tennessee, Ramsey's orchestration of what he calls a predictable and reliable and safe and godly company, has been under stress from COVID-19 and Ramsay's demands for unquestioning loyalty. I think COVID-19 and the entire pandemic that we've experienced over the past year and a half has really put into perspective for a lot of people how business gurus don't have the answers. I think a lot of business, self-help, and lifestyle gurus founded their entire brands on this concept of you're in control of your life, you control your destiny. If you just believe and manifest hard enough, nothing can get in your way. And then a global pandemic hits and throws the world a huge curveball, and next thing we know, turns out we didn't have as much control of our lives as we thought, and that's caused a lot of these gurus to become somewhat obsolete, it seems like. So I think that the inclusion of, COVID-19 kind of threw everything off track. Definitely can see that, and we're going to also go into a little more about that as well. Ramsay's intolerance for dissent has created what former employees call a cult-like environment, where leaders proclaim their love for staff and then fire people at a moment's notice. Ramsay Solutions, former employees and their spouses say, is run more like a church than a business. A review of court documents, company emails, and recordings of staff meetings backs up these sources' claims that company leaders attempt to exert control over employees' personal lives. So we're going to take a look in a minute at a couple of lawsuits that talk about how this company seemed cult-like and how this company tried to control employees' personal lives. But before we do that, let's just hear it straight from the source, from the employee who I interviewed.
How involved they get is ridiculous. And if I could tell people working there to run, I would. It's, we have to value ourselves, and it is this, you have to give it your all. You have to be all in 110%. And if you're not, then what happens? And so I see that struggle. And so I just, I hope people who are working there and thinking about leaving understand that work can just be work. Like it can just be a paycheck, and you can work hard and you don't have to give it your all in the way that Dave Ramsey expects. One thing that they talk about is called the Ramsey rapture. And so whenever somebody leaves the company, nobody talks to them anymore. And it's a weird thing because you consider these coworkers your family, and then you leave and you never hear from them again. And I remember leaving, and I left on good terms, and I had a lot to unlearn. I had a lot of just the ways I viewed certain things in life. I unlearned, and I'm still working on it years later, of, standing up for myself, or my viewpoints of what a job is, or my viewpoints on what a human being is. So I completely disagree with Dave politically and a lot of things spiritually. And so it's unpacking that and understanding that diversity of thought, diversity of people, inclusion of thought and people and everything is such a beautiful thing, especially in the workplace, because I think you get even further when you have a company that has people who believe in all different types of stuff, whether they believe that using red ink is better than blue ink, or whether they believe of a certain political person. And so because you're in this tiny box where everybody has to believe the same thing and you get out of it, you're like, whoa, I have to really figure out what I believe in.
So a couple months after that article came out, by the way, both of these first two articles are from Religion News Service. I will link all my sources in the description below. After that article came out saying, is this really among the best places to work? Well, this article came out in April of 2021, just last month, saying Dave Ramsey's company dropped from Best Workplaces list by Inc. magazine. After learning that Dave Ramsey's company was being sued for firing a pregnant employee, a major business publication dropped Ramsay Solutions rankings from its best workplaces list. Now, before we delve into this article, let's look at what happened with Dave Ramsey firing a pregnant woman. All right, so this is from Inc. magazine. This is where formerly Dave Ramsey's company had been listed among the best places to work, but then it got removed. And this article says, lawsuit alleging pregnancy-related firing stirs controversy. Business owners criticize the policy at Tennessee company founded by an evangelical Christian radio host that has led to a lawsuit raising questions about employees' right to privacy outside work. All right, so let's see what happened here. A company owned by evangelical Christian radio host Dave Ramsey is disputing a former employee's claim that she was fired because she was pregnant. Lawyers for the company Ramsey Solutions stated in a March 8th court filing that the employee was fired because she had premarital sex, according to news reports this week. Ramsey Solutions is a personal finance coaching company based in Franklin, Tennessee, with more than 500 employees. Caitlin O'Connor, a former administrative assistant at Ramsey Solutions, alleged in a federal lawsuit in July that she was discriminated against on the basis of sex when she was fired, according to Tennessean. In the new court documents, the company argued that O'Connor was fired not because she was pregnant, but because she wasn't married to her partner, the baby's father, which was a violation of the company's righteous living policy. So we're going to talk about, is this company a cult? A righteous living policy? I don't know, that's setting off a few cult bells in my mind right here. As many people know, in a lot of parts of the US, pregnancy is a protected class. Now, also a lot of states in the US are at-will employment states, meaning that an employer can fire you for whatever reason, and at the same time as an employee, you can quit for whatever reason you want. So we're going to keep in mind that Tennessee is an at-will employment state, but let's take a look real quick right here about 7 misconceptions about at-will employment in Tennessee, just to talk about this a little bit. So it says Tennessee is considered an at-will employment state. In general, this means your employer can fire you at any time for any reason or for no reason at all, but naturally there are some exceptions to this rule. Number one that it talks about here on this website, which is based on the lawyers of Brown and Roberto, so this is a lawyer's website, it says, the general rule in Tennessee is that you can be fired for good cause, bad cause, or no cause at all. In other words, you are an employee at will, but there are countless exceptions. For example, you cannot be fired or discriminated against in employment based upon your gender, race, religion, age over 40, national origin, or disability. The question is, does that include pregnancy? Well, let's take a look at another source. So according to the website A Better Balance, this article right here says pregnant workers in Tennessee now have a clear right to reasonable accommodations. Starting October 1st, 2020, Tennesseans who are working while pregnant, recovering from childbirth, or who need to express breast milk at work are protected under the law from discrimination. So this basically is a summary right here. What does the Tennessee Pregnant Workers Fairness Act do? And keep in mind this act, this article is from not that long ago, so was this just added recently? I'm not an expert in Tennessee law. If you are, feel free to comment below. But right here it says that this law protects pregnant employees and those who have recently given birth from discrimination at the workplace. So basically, while Tennessee is an at-will employment state, the question here is, was this woman wrongfully fired for being pregnant? Basically, what Dave Ramsey is saying is, well, I didn't technically fire her for being pregnant. I fired her for being pregnant while not married. So the question here is, does Dave Ramsey have any ground to stand on? I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to answer that from a legal perspective. I'm just going to answer that from the perspective of, regardless what the law says, Dave Ramsey is an asshole. That is an asshole thing to do. Let's continue. The company stated that it has fired at least 8 other employees, including 5 men, for having premarital sex. So I don't know if this is a sign that they could be like, well, this isn't gender-based discrimination, because when we find out that a man has gotten a woman pregnant outside of wedlock, he gets fired too.
Recently we saw that Dave Ramsey had fired a woman for being pregnant, which I think in most states, at least, pregnancy is a protected class. You're not allowed to fire someone for being pregnant. And I guess his defense was, well, at this company, she is pregnant out of wedlock, and we don't allow that at this company, which is horrifying. I guess without revealing too much of your personal information, what can you say about this situation, or what you noticed about the situation where he fired a pregnant woman?
She wasn't the first.
Mm.
He fired somebody for that 3 years prior that I had heard. And so He fired them for having sex. That's his defense. I didn't fire her because she's pregnant. I fired her because she had sex, and that's against our Judeo-Christian values. And if you look at the court case, he fired 8 other people for the same reason. One person because he lived with his partner, his fiance, and their boss, intermingling, if that's the right term, in people's personal lives, which is absurd to say you can't live with your fiance. You can't live with them until you're married. So yeah, it's not the first, and I've heard of other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone who watches this video is a devoted Christian, please correct me, because I personally do not practice any particular religion. But from what I've gathered from most of the Christians I know in my life who care about their religion, protecting a pregnant woman, protecting a new life coming into this world. And, I feel like Jesus would want to protect a pregnant woman and help her give that child that best life. You don't throw a pregnant woman out of a job. Like, that just seems like the opposite of being a good Christian, in my opinion.
Exactly. And we know that there's just more stories like that of so much gray area, and how is that right? And it's hard because Dave Ramsey has helped a lot of people financially, but I think he has gained such an ego from this for the past 30 years that he can do no wrong. So when employees come to their leaders with issues, they're being gaslit and saying, "Oh, would you not agree?" Or, do you not believe in the mission anymore? And I'm assuming you don't trust us. And people either are fired or they leave, and it creates a toxic workplace where from the outside, people think it looks a lot of fun, and you just have all these great coworkers, and you have this great boss who helps people get out of debt. But then you realize that you get into this culture, and if you do anything wrong, you're going to get fired. Especially if you get pregnant out of wedlock, you're going to get fired. And it's just high control toxicity.
Ramsey Solutions was named a 2020 Inc. Best Workplaces honoree, having met objective criteria through an application and employee survey process. Ramsey has the right to manage its business in accordance with its values. The court system will determine the merits of the lawsuit. Upon hearing about the company's, quote, righteous living policy, cult living policy, and how it is applied, we believe that it is incompatible with our standards of organizational excellence and have made the editorial decision to remove the company from our 2020 Best Workplaces list. So Inc. is basically saying the law will decide whether or not Ramsey Solutions has done something illegal here, but we're deciding that from our subjective editorial viewpoint, we don't think they're that great of a place to work anymore. And I would have to agree, based on the fact that, you can get fired for things you do in your personal life. Dave Ramsey seems to think he has the authority to say whether or not you have to be married in order to have children, which he personally has every right to make that in his personal life. Those are his personal values, and that is more than fine, but it just seems very invasive to hold his employees to those standards when people should all have the right to keep their work and professional lives as separate as they want to. Business owners joined the chorus of online outrage over news of the lawsuit. I thought it was terrible, both from a leadership and empathy standpoint, says Tom Gimbel, founder and CEO of Chicago-based staffing company LaSalle Network, which has ranked 12 times on the Inc. 5000 of the fastest growing U.S. private companies. The whole concept of being able to track if somebody is or is not having sex is absolutely crazy. He adds that a company that prohibited premarital sex among its employees could seem hypocritical if it didn't apply the same standards to its customers or to its leadership. At what point does that become, I won't say sexual harassment in a legal sense, I'm just saying, at what point is that, ew, why are you thinking about your employees or customers or whoever having sex? That is just completely separate from your work life. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, discriminating against an employee for being pregnant is illegal for companies with 15 or more employees. Whether a company can legally fire an employee for having premarital sex is more of a gray area and has led to lawsuits against religious employers that terminated unmarried employees who became pregnant. While federal law does not prohibit discrimination discrimination based on marital or familial status. Some states' laws do, says Tracy Diamond, a labor and employment attorney at the Philadelphia office of the law firm Troutman Pepper. The burden is on the employee to prove that the company's claim that she violated its policies was a pretext and that she was actually fired because of her pregnancy, Diamond says. Ramsay Solutions did not respond to a request for comment by Press Time. So let me make something extra clear as I possibly can. Like I said, I am not a lawyer and I am not here to comment on the legality. I am not here to say Dave Ramsey legally deserves or legally doesn't deserve to be penalized by the court of law. I am here to say that I think that Dave Ramsey is a dick. We're here to dive into the buttholes of buttholes named Dave. Dave here is being a butthole. I just think that's invasive. And someone could easily say, okay, well, they don't have to work there. Sure, they don't. But again, this is an illegal argument. I'm not talking about what's going to happen legally. They have a right to not work there. Dave Ramsey has a right to do whatever he wants to. I have a right to call Dave Ramsey an asshole for doing that. I think he's a dick. But I'm wondering if this is more than Dave Ramsey being a dick. I'm wondering if this starts to creep into cult territory. Like I mentioned earlier, certain phrases like a righteous living policy and such a fixation on what your employees are doing in their own personal lives outside of work seems like it's starting to encroach almost on cult territory. Now, I cannot say for certain whether something is or is not a cult, but thankfully, I'm not necessarily the one who did say it. Someone else said it when Dave Ramsey was also faced with a lawsuit in this same time period for having a cult-like work environment. So we're going to take a look at this article from Nashville Scene, which is called Former Dave Ramsey Employee Alleges Cult-Like Environment in Lawsuit. Ramsey and his company Ramsay Solutions are being sued for religious discrimination, fraud, and misrepresentation. Radio host and personal finance pundit Dave Ramsey and his company Ramsay Solutions are being sued for religious discrimination, fraud, and misrepresentation based on claims that echo recent high-profile rumors about company culture, but also outline broader similarities to cults. Legal representation for Brad Amos, former employee for the Lampo Group who does business as Ramsay Solutions, filed a lawsuit in Chancery Court at the Williamson County Judicial Center. This suit alleges that the company facilitates a cult-like work environment that infringed upon Amos' own beliefs regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. The suit outlines an allegation from Amos about being obligated to attend a meeting of 900 employees after a confirmed case of COVID-19 among them was announced. The meeting, which Scene reported on at the time, was to announce that no one would work remotely because Ramsey stated that fear of working on-site due to COVID constituted weakness of spirit, which he reiterated on his radio show.
I've gone past the point. I have made a commitment to God to be kind to people who I don't agree with on these issues. And it's been very hard because some of these people are absolutely misbehaving. The number of times I've been screeched at for not wearing a mask
by some idiot in a store.
The number of times that I go into a business and the
business abuses me as a customer.
I'm tired of it. I'm getting angry enough. I'm getting ready to start a freaking crusade against these people.
If I'm getting ready to start a freaking crusade.
So the cult-like environment's starting because they're like, there's a confirmed case of COVID in this company. And Dave Ramsey saying, nope, we still have to have 900 people working in person with at least one person having a confirmed case of COVID. And when people are like, Dave, we do not want to catch COVID. We do not want to get sick from this global pandemic. He's like, well, that's weakness of spirit. I definitely see where the cult element's starting to come into play here. Amos claims to have confronted board member and head of Luc Lefebvre, I'm not sure how to say that, in front of staff about his concerns regarding the virus, especially because Amos's son has Coats disease. Amos was also concerned that the one confirmed COVID case at that point was somebody who reportedly sat about 15 feet away from Amos's work area. Ramsey said that the suit is rife with blatantly false allegations that are without merit. In fact, his inflammatory and false statements rise to the level of slander and defamation, which we are prepared to take action against Mr. Amos to stop him from making such comments about Ramsay Solutions, Ramsey tells Williamson homepage. Ramsey says he thinks the suit is little more than a smear campaign aimed at ruining his reputation and extortion for a big settlement. Amos's lawyers allege that their client asked about pre-existing rumors about cult-like attributes of the work environment almost a year before the pandemic pandemic reached the US, and the filed complaint outlines the latest chapter in an evolving saga of disparaging insights into the alleged Ramsay modus operandi. Amos's argument first establishes that interviewers and others at Ramsay Solutions reassured him before giving him the job that the company was not at all cult-like. I love that. The interviewers assured him, this company isn't a cult. I assure you it's not a cult. It then outlines the ways in which the employee felt this was misleading. If you've watched some of my other videos, we have delved a lot into the BITE model, which is created by Stephen Hassan. I even did a video about whether or not political parties are cults, which I still kind of think they are, linked up in the cards. Got demonetized, but that's life, I guess. I used his book, Stephen Hassan's book called The Cult of Trump, which delved into the ways that political figures like Donald Trump are able to use cult-like tactics to gain followers. We also talk a lot about how the BITE model is prevalent in multi-level marketing companies and companies that try to keep people invested in the company at all costs, even when staying with that company is not the best choice for them. So let's talk about what the BITE model is, right? B stands for behavioral control, I stands for information control, T is for thought control, and E is for emotional control. So if a company or an organization is trying to control these facets of your life, there's a good chance it could be creeping into cult territory. So let's take a look at what elements of this Dave Ramsey had in his own organization as well, and how that fed into cult-like elements. The first one is a pretty big one, which is isolation from family. The first cult-like attribute had nothing to do with the pandemic, as it took place during interviews and hiring during the summer of 2019. Rather, Amos claims the Lampo group isolated him from family after interviewers initially reassured him that he would be allotted unimpeded family time and that the company itself was family friendly. I can kind of see how, especially after we just looked at how a woman was fired for getting pregnant out of wedlock, it seems that Dave Ramsey wants to interfere in people's personal and family lives. So I can see how that could lead to isolation from family and how that could lead to a cult-like atmosphere. Manipulation of employee satisfaction reports. Amos adds that the Lampo group emphasized to him during the interview phase that it had been voted the best place to work for more than a decade straight by its own employees and that management had never interfered with the vote. He claims that the firm compelled employees to vote in the first place and only to praise Dave Ramsey and his brand. 2 weeks prior to the suit being filed, Inc. magazine also removed Ramsay Solutions from their best workplaces list. Amos's argument lists among several oddities that he believes didn't prove true. One of those oddities was a promise of opportunities for quick and significant advancements and salary increases based on work performance. Amos, meanwhile, comes from Los Angeles, where he previously worked for BLT Communications as a motion picture trailer editor, earning a salary just shy of $250,000. He accepted a significant decrease in salary, $150,000 less, to take the job, and claims the decision was based on reassurances Ramsay Solutions had made. Indoctrination. Hired by Ramsay Solutions in August 2019, Amos attests to the Lampo Group's onboarding process as being partly comprised of what his lawyers call 3 days of indoctrinating employees to constantly praise Dave Ramsey and or, quote, the Ramsey way. The suit defines the Ramsey way as a culture among employees of consistently expressing deeply personal connection with Dave Ramsey. Exaltation of Ramsey allegedly started during onboarding with group discussions in which employees shared so-called Dave stories, anecdotes about deeply personal moments wherein Ramsey somehow made significant impacts on their lives. One of the onboarding documents Amos received was Ramsey's so-called 14-point philosophy, on which one of the points, no gossip, explained a general rule against backstabbing, yet defined all aspects of it as a prohibition against any negative comments about Dave Ramsey or his management decisions. Okay, so right here we're getting a little bit of emotional and information control, right? There's no negativity allowed. You're not allowed to say anything negative about the leader, about the person running the company. If you have negative information to spread, that could be considered gossip or backstabbing. That could be part of this 14-point philosophy. It really does sound like Dave Ramsey is trying to squash any spread of negative information about himself. That really is how this is coming across to me. Now let's go to the next one, which we've touched on a little bit, invasion of private life. 2 other parts of the interview process prior to being hired also involved a spousal dinner and personality testing. Amos's wife was reportedly pushed to join the Lampo Ladies Facebook group, which he claims the Lampo group used not only to make the wives of male employees be friends, but also to monitor them for signs of employees' opinions, especially indicators of not being, quote, on board. So trying to get involved with employees and their spouses, trying to control not just what employees do in their personal time, but what their families and the people around them do. The cult shit's coming in pretty clear. Amos claims similar monitoring was also conducted via private weekly half-hour one-on-one meetings that he believes were meant to gauge his conformity or lack thereof to Ramsay's religious beliefs, both in the office and at home. He bases this on the very personal nature of the information mined out of these meetings about the employees themselves, such as answers to questions about life at home, their relationships with their spouses, their personal finances, and mental health. So honestly, I am seeing the cult-like elements here. When you are not allowed to criticize your leader, that is a red flag. When your personal life is being intertwined with an organization that you are a part of in every way, whether that is a job that you work for or a group that you belong to or even a religion or a political group or anything, if any group that you belong to is trying to control every element of your personal life, I do see that as a red flag. So now let's take a look back at that first article we were reading on Religion News Services, which was talking about, is Dave Ramsey's company really that great of a place to work? Starting to lean towards no. But let's take a look at Dave Ramsey's side to this, which he is about to share. At a staff meeting in July, Ramsay railed at his staff after an employee sued Ramsay Solutions for firing her for having premarital sex, which is against company policy, and said he would pay the price to protect what he had built out of love for his employees. "I'm sick of dealing with all this stuff," Ramsay bellowed, according to a recording obtained by Religion News Service. "I'm so tired of being falsely accused of being a jerk when all I'm doing is trying to help people stay in line." In a sarcastic email responding to a request for comment on the story, Ramsay Solutions wrote, "We want to confirm for you that you are right. We are horrible, evil people." In a follow-up email, the company said that it contests many of the facts, details, and conclusions of Religion News Service's reporting without specifying their objections. The company also declined to comment on pending litigation. Religion News Service's request for comment was also emailed to all the staff at the company and to local pastors. Many of them emailed or called either to tell how Ramsay's teaching had changed their lives and their passion to change the toxic money culture. So let's take a look real quick. Here it is. Here is the full email that Ramsay Solutions sent back to the reporter at Religion News Service, who emailed them asking for comment on the story instead of, here's the thing, if I were in Dave Ramsey's position, I would want to sit down and, whether that's debunking or sharing my side of the story, if I truly felt that I was in the right about what I was doing, I would latch on to that opportunity to share my side of the story rather than sending this email that we're going to read right now. So this is what Dave Ramsey's company sent back. They said, "Thanks for reaching out. We want to confirm for you that you are right. We are horrible, evil people. We exist simply to bring harm to our team, take advantage of our customers, and spread COVID. And you figured it all out. Wow. Who would have guessed that an unemployed guy, a quote, freelance reporter, would be the one to show us how horrible we are so we can change and let the world know of our evil intent, secrets, and complete disregard for decency. But you did it. You, with all your top-notch investigative skills, have been able to weave together a series of half-truths to expose our evil ways. You are truly amazing. Because your personal virtue is so incredible, we wanted to help you with your hit piece and confirmation bias. We actually have audio of the time Chris Hogan farted in church, and you should have a listen. It is truly horrendous. A couple of weeks ago, our team decided to do a worship service today at 4:30 to kick off the new year. We would love to have you come. You can bring your camera and get some great shots because there will probably be someone without a mask. Who knows? There might be someone not socially distancing, and if you use those razor-sharp investigative skills of yours, you will probably catch one of them with their hands raised in worship to Jesus, which, if captioned properly, would prove we are an evil cult. Since this is today, it won't even delay your Pulitzer Prize-winning expose of our pure evilness. You will be in a building where 1,000 people hate you, but we will assign security to protect you. That is how cults do it. Please let us know in advance if you can make it so we can personally meet you at the door. And thanks again for using your superior virtue to point out our pure evil intent. I'm sure you can find more if you keep looking. We are also blind copying several friends to ask their help as well. They are the pastors of top churches in the area, several business leaders, and and Christian leaders who have known Dave and Ramsey's solutions for decades. Also, we are copying our whole team. If you are on this email, we would ask a favor for Ramsey. Would you help us? Bob's phone number and email are here, and we would ask that you contact him today and tell him all the horrible, evil stories you know about us. Also, he lives in Spring Hill, so if you see him out and about, be sure to congratulate him on his virtue. He needs to sell this story and pay his rent, and the dirtier your story on us, the more we can help him. When you call, please do not be mean. Bob already has a lot of anxiety, and we don't want to add to that. If his phone is overwhelmed or he doesn't want to hear your story, you should contact Religion News Service and tell them of Bob's amazing graphs on virtue and truth. You can also tell them of all people that have been helped by his pursuit of truth throughout the years, as we have all followed his, quote, career. It is time the world knows about Bob and the blessing he has been to so many. Dude, someone really spent the time to type all of that out rather than just actually doing the interview with Bob. Literally, why wouldn't you share your side of the story? Why would you assume something is a hit piece if they're asking for your side? If you have something right to share on your side, you share it, right? Right now, the article looks biased against Dave Ramsey because Dave and none of his representatives commented. Instead, they just sent that rude ass email. When you're working in journalism, how are you supposed to get that person's side of the story if that's literally all they're willing to give you? I also do take a little bit of personal offense at this, where he puts, quote, freelance reporter in quotes and calls that being unemployed. Dave Ramsey is a fairly conservative person, right? If you look at the conservative side of the political spectrum, a lot of what we see on there tends to be belief in getting the government out of people's personal lives. We don't want the government to be involved in religion. We want to be able to use our religion in our business if we want, which means we want the government out of business, right? So we want business and the government to be separate. If we want that to be separate, then that would then lead to, okay, free market has to prevail. If somebody is willing to offer a service and somebody's willing to buy that service regardless of anything else, capitalism is king, right? Well, if we're living in a society where capitalism is supposed to be the superior model, then the gig economy and freelance work would naturally be a part of that, because if people are willing to provide freelance services and people are willing to pay them for freelance services, then that is valid and honest and reasonable work. So why would someone who's trying to prove that, you know, the free market and the conservative way of life is fair and fine and all of that, then shit on someone for being a freelance reporter and call that unemployment? Maybe I wasn't supposed to make that connection, but that personally doesn't make sense to me, so I don't understand what the philosophy is there. Also, I am a freelance journalist, so I'm kind of like, ooh, was that targeted at me? Like, not directly, but it is targeted at people in my profession who do make money being freelance journalists. And you know what? I like being a freelance journalist because it means I get to work for small businesses and I get to work for smaller magazines. So after listening to what one of Dave Ramsey's former employees had to say, looking at some of the articles about his workplace and looking into some of the lawsuits going on, some of the misogyny at his office, some of the discrimination that people had been facing, what do you guys think? Do you think Dave Ramsey is a cult leader? Do you think he's just kind of a jerk? Do you think he'd be a good boss to work for? I don't imagine how he could be, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below as always. Thank you for watching this episode of Deep Daves. I will see you guys again tomorrow morning on the second channel on Your Morning Guru. Don't forget to subscribe to that. We've been actually following Dave Ramsey on that channel, so we've delved into all his shady shit leading into this video, which is a lot of fun. Make sure you're subscribed to that channel and tune in tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Central, where we'll be working on our novel together. In the meantime, though, don't forget to support small businesses, and I'll see you again here next week. Bye, friends!
Dave!
From the standpoint of, ooh, you will not go unpunished.
You guys asked for it.